Hey everybody, before we begin our show today, I would be remiss if I didn't acknowledge the very painful, tragic, and sad last week that our nation has been going through. Of course, I'm talking about the heinous murder of George Floyd in Minneapolis. So in that light, and as an opportunity to reflect on the meaning of his death, I'd like to begin today's show with a moment of silence for George Floyd. Thank you. Let's start the show. Hi, and welcome to The Working Songwriter, the show where today's best songwriters come to talk shop. I'm your host, Joe Pug. Each episode here, we host a distinguished guest, and we ask them to go deep on their inspiration, on their process, on the general ups and downs of making a life in music. So, whether you're a grizzled veteran still recording demos on blank cassettes on your Panasonic boombox, or else a scrappy upstart attempting to record an entire multi-tracked album into your voice memos app, this is your show. Because ultimately, it is what every writer seeks most: an ironclad excuse to put off actually writing. Hey guys, it's the last Friday of June. No, it's the first Friday of June 2020, and I thank you for joining us. This week's show is brought to you by Bandzoogle, built by musicians and for musicians. Bandzoogle is an all-in-one platform to build a beautiful website for your music. I'm old enough to remember when you had to pay somebody called a web developer to get a website made. And it would always be some guy named Arnalds who drove a Mazda Protege with a 40 ounces to freedom bumper sticker on it, and who vaped even before anyone knew vaping was a thing. And old Arnalds would charge you about $1,000 for a website that would be obsolete in about a month. It's the future now, you guys. We don't have to deal with Arnalds anymore or web developers. We have nice things. We have Bandzoogle. Bandzoogle powers the websites of tens of thousands of musicians around the world, from weekend warriors to Grammy winners. You get hosting and a custom domain name, dozens of fully customizable design templates, social media integrations, the ability to do fan subscriptions commission-free. It's a great service. The Working Songwriter podcast listeners can go to bandzoogle.com to try it for free for 30 days. Just use the promo code TWS to get 15% off the first year of any subscription. If you'd like to hear some of my music live in the coming months, I will not be anywhere in the real world because we're still dealing with COVID. I will be on my YouTube channel on Sunday nights. There's going to be a little bit of a break in between shows. Right now, I'm getting ready to come back with a version 2.0 of that show. So I'll let you know when those are back up, Sunday nights on YouTube. Finally, if you enjoy this podcast, if you'd like to help it remain a viable endeavor for me, here's a couple things that you could do to help. First of all, you could become a supporter of the show over at Patreon. Patreon is a platform that allows you to directly support creative endeavors that you love. Just think of it as a voluntary subscription. You head over to their site, Patreon, you search for The Working Songwriter, and you sign up to kick in, the cost of a cup of coffee every month, for the show. If just 1% of our listenership would do that, we would be in a great place. So thanks for doing that. Thanks for considering. I'll end all of the harassment there. I've known Ed and Gordy of Band of Heathens for many years. They run a really legit operation. They're a great band, and I hope that you enjoy our conversation. Our guests this month are the core of a rock and roll band from Austin, Texas, and that is rock and roll with 2 capital R's. Ed, Jurdi and Gordy Quist met in Austin, Texas as independent songwriters, but it wasn't long before they joined forces as the Band of Heathens. Their debut album, produced by Ray Wylie Hubbard, featured a whole litany of Texas music royalty as guests, including Patty Griffin, Stephen Bruton, and Gurf Morlix. It went to the top of the Americana radio charts, and the band stepped onto the national stage with a robust touring operation. They've appeared on Austin City Limits alongside Elvis Costello, and also on the legendary German concert series Rockaplast. They've been nominated by the Americana Music Association as its Best Emerging Artist and its Group of the Year. They made such a fan of Kid Rock that he name-checked them on the Howard Stern Show and then hired them to come to his studio in Michigan to record an album. Rolling Stone says that their sound mixes Americana earnestness with Stone's swagger. Pop Matters has noted that the band knows how to lock into airtight grooves as well as keep things loose and free. And the Austin Chronicle has said of them, "What Band of Heathens does best is take the old, polish it like new, and make it appeal to everyone." I was lucky enough to get the chance to sit down with Ed and Gordy last week to hear about their journey so far. Ed and Gordy, thanks for being on the program. We've been talking about doing this for a really long time. I was hoping that you could take me back to about, the mid-2000s, 2005, 2006. You guys are getting started as songwriters and then as a band. Talk to me about what the scene was like in Austin, Texas at that time when you were just getting started.
Well, the scene back then was there was a heavy singer-songwriter scene going on. That when I moved to town, everybody was like, "You got to hang at this place called Momo's. That's the place to be." And there were a bunch of great venues to play, but for some reason, this was like the spot to hang. You wanted to get a gig there, but also just to like hang out and meet people, and so that's kind of what we did. And then I finally got like a residency gig there when, there was a Wednesday night residency with 4 different acts, and one of the acts moved away or something, and so like I was fortunate enough to grab a spot, and then Ed, I think, moved to town right after me, and he got the 4th spot when it opened up, and that was kind of the birth of the band. It was just us all hanging out there, and ended up getting put on the bill one right after another.
So it would just, you go in and play like a half-hour set or an hour-long set and make some dough from the club, or is that how it worked, basically?
It was more like hour-long sets, and oftentimes lose money, because they want everyone. It was like full band. It wasn't like we were playing solo. We were playing with a band, and actually the same drummer was playing in all 4 bands, and there were 2 bass players between the 4 bands, and then we would actually hire each other, to sit in and play guitar or piano or whatever in each other's band. So it was this really collaborative scene. And it's funny, the birth of the band is it was an accident. We didn't intend to really form a band, but it was kind of a little microcosm of the collaborative nature of Austin at the time. It was just kind of like everybody helping each other out and wanting to like have fun making music.
What's kind of sad is I feel like in my mind, that is the picture of Austin and live music that I have. By the time I left Austin, let's say 2 or 3 years ago, I don't feel like that's what it looked like anymore by the time I left. Do you think that there's still that in Austin, or has it changed?
I think there is a lot of that still happening.
We're just old.
Well, no, honestly, that's what I was going to say is like, with the Heathens, we kind of took the show on the road, and we ended up being gone, 200, 250 dates a year on the road and playing here less and less. And now the band is really spread out across the country. So only 2 of us live here. And so it became a thing where when I was home and, being married and then later on having children, it was like, when I'm home, I'm going to be home with my kids. I'm not going to be out every night like I was when I was younger. And there's a good scene and some really great songwriters around that are kind of doing the thing that was happening when we were younger. And I try to, be as active as I can, but it's also nowadays, it's like the responsibilities of family life is something to balance that with,
Yeah, it's different. Who was coming up in that scene at that time who is still playing now that we might know?
Well, last night we just talked to Seth Walker. He was around back then. Ed, who else was around?
I feel like we kind of came in. Most of the people were already pretty established. I guess that, like at least on the Austin scene, like Patrice Pike and Guy Forsyth. Yeah, that's a really good question, Joe. I have to. I mean, I guess Brian Keene's still writing in Nashville. He's doing stuff. Rachel Loy. She was there as well.
Well, if not from your generation, I know that you guys have always had a really tight connection with sort of an older guard from Austin. I'm talking about the Ray Wiley Hubbards, Gerf Morlicks, a few other people. Who were some of the older guard who shepherded you guys along at first?
Well, Ray certainly. I mean, he took an early interest in the band, and we sealed our fate at a meeting at a Dairy Queen in Dripping Springs. That's where we had a great meeting with Ray, and he helped us produce our first record. Really, he kind of was like, "Hey, I like what you guys are doing. I want to bring you in, and I want to help you make a cool record." So that was cool. There was guys like Stephen Bruton, who was a great sideman. He played with Chris Christopherson and Bonnie Raitt, also a great songwriter. John D. Graham, also a great songwriter, really supportive. I think the thing about Austin that was cool, and that still is by and large, is the musical community is all really supportive. There wasn't a very, I think in some places there's a bit more of a competition. There seems like there's a limited number of spaces for people to sort of occupy. But in Austin, it was kind of like if you could do the gig, then you were kind of welcomed in. That was the test. And I think with the established guard, like you said, Gerf Morlicks, Ray Wiley Hubbard, guys like that, they were really encouraging and really supportive, which was great.
So when Ray Wiley Hubbard tells you in a Dairy Queen that he's going to help you make a cool record, what was Ray Wiley Hubbard's conception of making a cool record? What did that process look like, and what did you learn from it?
We learned that it's all about the vibe from Ray. He really, I think, when you get into your craft, you tend to sort of fret about the minutia and the things that really aren't perceptible to people listening to music or people checking out what you're doing. Ray had a knack for, I think, certainly being concerned about those things, but having a much better idea of the big picture. That was a great take. The music sounded great. It's in the right place. Your guitar's a little out of tune. We could let that slide, I think just this concept of creating a vibe and an aura and that being the thing that you're trying to capture in the studio.
It's funny.
Feeling to be working. Go ahead, Gordy.
Well, I was just thinking, it's funny how in music there's a vocabulary and there's a language that can be very specific. And then there's also a vocabulary and a language that's very vague, and yet it is specific to something that's beyond words. And Ray was really, really great with that. I remember one time things got really tense. We were probably arguing about something in the studio, and Ray kind of walks into the middle of the thing and pauses, reaches into his pocket and pulls out a switchblade knife and pops it open, and the room goes silent. And then he just calmly walks over there and cuts open a pallet of bottled waters and grabs himself a water. And it was just moments like that where it's like that was what was needed, even though he didn't say anything. And now I'm making records with lots of different people. It's really easy to try to, for me especially, I get caught up sometimes trying to explain what is in my head. And I think what I learned from Ray was sometimes leaving it open-ended. Hey, that was a really good take, guys, but you know what? Can you just do it one more time, but just make it sound cooler? It's like, okay, well, what does that mean? Well, you may not know exactly, but you get the idea, and using adjectives like greasy or slinky and cooler and darker. It's like, well, okay, that means something, but it's not so specific that you're telling somebody what to do,
Nothing's worse than someone from a control room telling someone else very specifically what to do on the other side of the glass. I mean, that always ends in tears.
Yeah. It's music is kind of one of those things where you want the people in the room to be being themselves. And if you hire someone to come in and play drums on a record or play guitar, it's like you're not hiring someone to come in and play what's in your head just because you're producing the record. You are hiring someone to come in and express themselves in a way that you may or may not have heard in your head, but you hired them because they're going to do what they do. And that's when the best music is made, you know.
I've heard that is, and I think I've probably told this on the podcast before. I don't know if it's apocryphal or not. I've heard that's how Woody Allen casts his movies. He casts a person, and he doesn't really give him any direction on camera because he's just like, well, I want you to do your thing. If I casted the thing right, I won't have to tell you anything. Yeah,
I think that's true. I think at a certain point with these kind of arts that have kind of some open-ended interpretation, there's really no amount of talking that's going to get you to where you need to get to, you know? It's like you bring someone in, they do what they do. If that's right for it, it's easy. You never have to have a conversation. If it's wrong, you find yourself having these really long conversations trying to explain your point of view and trying to get to a common place that no one's ever satisfied, and it doesn't exist. You know?
It's never going to get. Have you guys had experiences like that before, where you bring somebody in, and after just the first few notes, a couple of minutes in, you're just like, this isn't going to work, and I have this person booked for 3 hours.
Well, that's when you walk in and you go, oh man, that was so great. Thank you so much. Here's your check. I think we're good. That went a lot faster than I thought it would. And then you move on.
Nailed it.
Even more interesting is when it happens within the band, you know, because sometimes that's just the thing. Someone has an idea in their head, and it's just like, let's just stop talking about it. Just you do what you're hearing. If that works and you're happy with it and everyone's cool with it, then that's what we'll go with, and we'll move from there. You know, rather than sort of trying to impose your vision on someone else where you're almost talking different languages. I know you've been in a situation like that too, where you're trying to articulate something and it's like, it's beyond words, to Gordy's point. You know, it's just like, we either have it or we don't. We don't, we need to move on.
In my experience, it's much more likely that we don't have it. I don't know what it's been like for you guys. So you meet with Ray at the Dairy Queen. You go make this record. He's opening cases of water with switchblades. It's a great time. You guys, somewhere after this, go from being these scrappy young guys playing at Momo's, you know, hiring each other to play in one another's bands in Austin, to touring the United States, touring the world. What did that first break look like for you after that album with Ray onto the more national stage?
That's a good question. You know, I don't know that there have been any like massive breaks that were like, oh, you know, we made it, but we've been fortunate in that every couple of years something great happens for us. I think early on, one of the first things was probably just at the Austin Music Awards, like the local music awards, getting nominated, and I think maybe like winning the best new band. And, you know, these happen right before South by Southwest. And so that creates all this buzz, and just being recognized with that allowed us to go book tours nationally, because Austin was a respected place, and that seemed to mean something to, okay, well, if these guys are happening there, then yeah, sure, we'll give them a shot, even though they can't draw anybody in whatever town. And so that was kind of the first thing to kind of get us on the road. And we very early decided, once we're like, okay, this is a band, this isn't just a side project we're going to do on Wednesday nights. We wanted to get out of town. We wanted to get out of Texas and tour nationally and not be just a regional band doing it. And yeah, I think the first kind of break was that. And then the next one was probably a few years later, getting asked to do the Austin City Limits TV show. And that was a huge national platform. That was really great for us.
Yeah, and you guys were on that with Elvis Costello, your episode, right?
We were, yeah. Fantastic. Now, a little secret, we didn't tape at the same time.
Sure.
We taped our show, but what was really cool is when Elvis came back, and he was doing kind of like an Americana bluegrass thing at that time. He had, I think he had Jerry Douglas in his band, and Jim Lauderdale, killer group of players. But, they invited us back to his taping, and we got to hang with those guys, and they were all cool. So it was just ACL, it's just sort of, it's kind of like the pinnacle of music shows to me. Growing up watching that show, seeing so many memorable, amazing performances, and then being invited into it being a band from Austin, it was really kind of a great full circle moment. You know, one of those moments in the career where like we're all sitting backstage before the show, and you know everyone kind of looks at each other like, all right, guys, this is pretty cool. You know, we did something good here. You know,
Definitely. At that time while you're touring, what was the transition like for you guys touring for the first time? Did everyone take to it like ducks to water, or was it difficult, or how did you experience it yourselves?
Well, I've always loved touring. I mean, you know, when I was 17 or 18, I read On the Road and got in my car, drove across the country, did all that kind of stuff. So I was, to me, before the idea of even being able to facilitate being a touring musician, you know, I was into the idea of kind of being on the road and having a gypsy lifestyle. So, you know, I think for me it was great. I think as a band, I think we did pretty well, to be honest with you. You know, I mean, if you think about the dynamic of having 5 or 6 people packed into a small vehicle, you know, with no personal space, people with differing, you know, views on the world politically, religious, you know, different religions. I mean, all kinds of stuff. I think we got along really well, you know, and I think there was a, you know, getting started, there was a good all for one and one for all mentality. I mean, everything that everyone did went back into the band. You know, I think that was a big part of our initial success, and just, you know, really creating a foundation to allow us to continue doing it. You know, whereas it was very methodical. There wasn't like a 10-year plan. It was like, all right, let's do this tour. If this tour goes well, we'll have some money to reinvest in what we want to do next, and on, you know. So that was just, we kind of set it up and knock it down. That was kind of our mentality.
Yeah, it's so great. You really got to start a band like that early on in life so that everyone can be in a position to just be like, yeah, whatever we made this tour, roll it back into the band. You know, it's really tough to do that. I feel like once you get older and you have responsibilities, you're going to have people say, you know, that big show where we made a bunch of money, I'm going to take that home and spend it on the mortgage. It's really important to not have any shit when you start a band, it seems like.
Yeah, I think that's very true. And same goes for probably relationships too. You know, I think there's like a toll financially and personally. It's like the ideal scenario is everybody's really young and unattached, and you can truly just be throwing yourself into that. We were all married and kind of trying to juggle that side of things as well as the finances. But yeah, you know, I don't know that I'd have it in me to like do it again. You know, start a band over. At this point, it's hard work. You know, it's really hard.
Yeah, it is, and it's hard to keep together. You guys did lose one of your founding members relatively early on. Was that? I mean, I'm not trying to create too much drama here or anything, but was that an acrimonious split or a split where people just needed to go different directions at that point?
Which member are you referring to?
I'm sorry. Well, let me go into my notes here.
No, it's all right. We really early, there was a really great songwriter. He still is a great songwriter, Brian Keane, but he was in the band initially, and that was in the Momo's Wednesday night days. He left pretty early because I think he just didn't want to be a guy in a band. He wanted to be a songwriter, and he ended up moving to Nashville to write.
Got it.
But then the band existed as a kind of 5 or 6 piece for, was that another 5 or 6 years? And that kind of became what people knew as the band, and with 3 lead singers. And so when Colin Brooks left, I think that's probably who you're referring to. That was in like late 2011, maybe. I mean, we're all still friends. It was honestly, it's that thing where like we've been doing this at the time. We had been doing this a long time and playing hundreds of shows a year. And at a certain point, it's like, okay, I think he just decided he was done with it. He was burned out. And, I mean, I can't speak for him, but that was my impression. And, you know, now he's a fly fishing guide, and I think doing well, and he still plays some music here and there, but, you know, it's a lot when you're like fully dedicated to trying to get a project off the ground. And
so what you're saying is he's smarter than all 3 of us put together.
Yeah, you could say that. What you know, it's like it takes being content with what you're doing is like it's a different formula for everybody, and I think you got to respect when somebody is pretty far down a path, and then they can look around and take inventory of their life and be like, you know what, this is not what I want to do. This is not what I'm meant to do, or this isn't working. And to be actually like have the courage and the like just to be able to totally, you've invested a lot into something, and then to go start over or do something else is, you got to respect it,
Yeah, I mean, we all know about the idea of the sunk cost fallacy, not throwing good money behind bad and all that, but in the moment actually doing it, it can be really hard to pull the trigger on it. 10 years in hindsight, it was the obvious thing to do, but at the time it was probably pretty scary for him.
Yeah, I think so. And I think at that point, I mean, like Gordy said, we've been at it pretty hard for like 5 years. And I do think it was a grind. And I do think, at a certain point you start to wear on each other. And I think for Gordy and me, for better or worse, I think we've both kind of been all in always, you know what I mean? And I think, at that point in the band, if you weren't all in or you were struggling with some stuff, I'm not sure that we were necessarily sympathetic to that, or maybe you can kind of start to see where tensions would build, and it's not like acrimonious, you know what I mean? There wasn't like a lot of like, I fucking hate you, I'm gonna kill you, I'll never talk to you again. But it's it's a thing where it's just like, all right, like, hey, we see this one way, you see it another way. Obviously, this is not working out good for everyone, And then it takes someone like I applaud Colin. Like I think he had the courage to kind of say like, yeah, this is not what I thought it was going to be, and this is not working for me, and time to do something else.
So it didn't quite reach the level where you guys were acting like Michael Jordan to Jerry Krause.
No, but that would have been awesome. It would have made a much better press story.
Talk to me a little bit about those early touring days. Surely you toured with some other bands, either co-billed with them or opening for them, that you looked at their touring operation and their ability to do things on the road and put on shows city to city that really impressed you and you learned some things from. Who were some bands that you learned from and tried to emulate?
Wow.
Good question.
It was, and actually to the first point, we've never really toured very much with other bands. That would be the first answer to the question. But I mean, I guess some sort of one-off things that were impressive to me. We did some shows with the Black Crowes. Growing up in the time that I did, that band is a rock and roll band. Their template for the vibe and everything about it was super cool to me. We did a bunch of shows with Robert O'Keen, who was always great crew, total professional people. Awesome to be around. We did a bunch of shows with JJ Gray and Mofro. They were kind of a couple levels ahead of us at that point, and just, like you said, you kind of pick up these little things along the way, like kind of how to, if we had thinking back then, it's like, okay, if we had a tour manager and a sound guy and a lighting guy, like how would that operate, and how would I want to treat these people? You can see from the way different bands interact with either within themselves as band members or how they treat their crew, like, how you want to do those things. You can sort of start to emulate it, and those three examples, it was all those bands, like the crew were great guys. Like it was like a family atmosphere, and I think that's kind of, to my mind, that was always the thing that I wanted to create with a band. Kind of have that, you're away from home, you're away from your real family. This becomes your family. Like you're a family, you're a gang, you're sort of everyone's got to be there for each other.
I remember, I think it was Sam Bush who told us. I remember we had finished doing some shows. I think it was him. He just said, hey, remember guys, always be kind to one another. And that stuck with me. And another band that we've done some shows with, that kind of what Ed's talking about with the familial atmosphere, Blackberry Smoke, really great Southern rock band, that they're just the kindest guys to us, and it seems like their crew, everybody is respectful, and kind of seeing that as that's kind of more what I'm interested in. I mean, yeah, there's like light shows, and there's all sorts of the fun things that go with a rock and roll show that you can pick up here and there, but I think for longevity and for like for quality of life, it's like, okay, how do we learn how to actually enjoy this, and because that's the key to making it last. And I think those guys really have it dialed in terms of how you treat your opening band, how you collaborate with opening bands, inviting them on stage to jam, and those are the things that I think are fun. And from an audience perspective too, it's like that kind of stuff translates to a unique show that's unlike any other show that anybody else is going to see. Is like, how can we make tonight special?
That is such a good way of looking at it, because you can get so myopic sometimes just thinking about your set. But if you're thinking about it from the user experience, basically, if people come to show a fan experience, yeah, they're experiencing your set, but they're experiencing a night of music. So, I always try to think of it like, what are the ticketing platforms that we're on, and how frictionless is it on that? What are the fees? Are they just getting banged out for fees here? Can we structure that in a different way? What was it like when they got to the club? Is it a fun club where they have good drinks that are reasonably priced? I mean, and so just top to bottom, and obviously an opening act or the act that you're opening for, it is important to collaborate with them in a way, because you're giving people a night of music, and that's what they're going to remember.
Yeah, I mean, I think thinking about going to shows when I was a kid, or even as an adult, it's like, I mean, you go to see a band you like, and they invite someone up to play with them, and it's like, oh wow, this is amazing. It's like, where else can I see this? Where else can I go to have a unique experience like this? It's sort of it's just I think it's about having a little perspective in terms of like and selfishly, that's fun for us to do, but also, like, to Gordy's point, I mean, man, if I'm in the crowd at a show and I'm seeing a band I love, and they bring a guy out or a woman out from another band that I love, and they collaborate together on stage, it's like, that's complete magic. That's sort of like the essence of the live music experience right there,
Yeah, I mean, if I'm at a Ted Nugent concert and he brings Buckethead on,
I'm out.
My pants.
I'm fucking leaving. I'm out on the Nuge, man.
So you were mentioning, though, let me go back to an earlier point you made. You mentioned, we really haven't toured that much with other bands, presumably in packages and stuff like that. What's the reasoning behind that? Are you more, was it a financial reason? Was it you wanted to do more evening with stuff? How come you haven't toured with that many other bands in general?
I mean, that's a great question. It might be a little bit of each of it. I think it might lend to the larger point, though, that I guess we kind of feel as a band we've been a bit on an island, like we were in Austin, and there's some other bands from Austin, so within Texas we've collaborated and done shows with other bands here and there, but it's like, it's not like we're from Nashville. We weren't on a label. We didn't, we weren't really partnered up with other bands. We weren't really in the sort of framework of like, you put your first record out, you go out opening on a national tour for another act, and that's kind of how it starts. We just kind of started. We just started touring and doing shows, and I wish I had a better answer as far as like what the actual reason for it is, and I'm not sure there is. We did like doing evening with shows. That's on a selfish level. That is true, but I guess I don't know, Gordy, can you help me out here, because I'm floundering.
It's funny, we talk about this often, because we would love to do more with other bands and other songwriters. We love collaborating. There are so many artists that we love, but there's a couple things. Number one, we're a 5-piece band that tours with a B3 and a Leslie, and like, we have a lot of gear. Like, our setup is not simple. Now, we can scale it down. We can play totally acoustic. We can do whatever, but that's not really like the full experience. So I think part of it as an opening act, going out with a bigger band, is like, there are a few bands that are cool that like get it, where they're like, oh yeah, like that's important to the show. Sure, you guys like do your thing. So that's been part of it. And then financially too, we kind of like got off the ground quickly, I guess quickly enough that we were making more than we'd normally be making at those opener spots. Like we built a fan base over the first couple of years where we kind of outpaced, you make nothing when you go out opening for these bands. And so we were in this weird financial spot where it's like, this would be really good long-term for growth to invest in this. But sometimes it was difficult to make that choice. Maybe we should have done that more. I don't know. But yeah, I think there's just a lot of things at play. Ed and I, we we love doing these acoustic duo, just totally stripped down shows. That would probably work great as an opening act for somebody. It's real simple, setup wise, and the songs translate pretty well in that format. But that's not really the Band of Heathens. Like, it's a rock and roll band, and it's trying to stay true to that essence. I mean, it's a band, but we don't have like hired guns coming and going in the band. It's like if someone leaves the band, we're going to replace them. We're going to like spend the time finding the right person, because we want them to stick around for a long time, because we don't really like the revolving door feel, you know?
It's easy to understand the enduring nature of the Band of Heathens when you talk to Ed and Gordy together. There's a palpable respect, camaraderie, and just plain affection for one another. And I don't think that has to do with a unique chemistry that's just between the two of them. I think it has to do with an open, edifying disposition that they both have toward other people. When I moved to Austin, Texas 10 years ago as a young songwriter, Gordy made sure to grab a cup of coffee with me, get to know me, hear my story. Here he was, an established musician in town who was just giving me a hand up. There's a Walt Whitman poem that speaks to that edifying disposition towards strangers, which I think is beautiful. To a stranger. Passing stranger, you do not know how longingly I look upon you. You must be he I was seeking, or she I was seeking. It comes to me as of a dream. I have somewhere surely lived a life of joy with you. All is recalled as we flit by each other, fluid, affectionate, chaste, matured. You grew up with me, were a boy with me, or a girl with me. I ate with you and slept with you. Your body has become not yours only, nor left my body mine only. You give me the pleasure of your eyes, face, flesh as we pass. You take of my beard, breast, hands in return. I am not to speak to you. I am to think of you when I sit alone, or wake at night alone. I am to wait. I do not doubt I am to meet you again. I am to see to it that I do not lose you. Talk to me a little bit, and I've been waiting to get to this question. This is pretty much the whole reason that I wanted to get to this podcast immediately and tape it with you guys. I want to know everything about playing on Kid Rock's cruise and then going to record a record with him. Scotty Davis, who was in your band for many years, him and I once polished off a bottle of something, and he gave me the full experience. Talk to me about going on that cruise, meeting Kid Rock, and how that whole experience happened.
It was completely surreal, honestly. And here's how surreal it was. It started literally through him mentioning the fact that he liked our band on the Howard Stern show. So that was like the genesis of this. So literally, Gordy and I started getting texts from people like, "Hey, do you know Kid Rock?" No, I have no, not at all. Why? He's like, "Well, he was on Howard Stern. He's like plugging your band. He loves you." I was like, "Oh, that's crazy." So, whatever. I think we had our management reach out to his management. We sent him some shirts and just be like, "Hey, that's really nice of you. Here's some music and some shirts if you want to wear our shirts and pump our swag. That's super cool." And then I guess his cruise was probably a couple months later, and I think we got a call. I think they had an open slot, and he's like, "Hey, why don't you guys come on?" So from there, we got to meet him, and I guess just got to spend some time with him. I mean, I want to say that there was wild orgies and stripper poles and there was some debauchery, but by and large, it was good, clean fun. We we just developed a relationship. Like he has a stage persona, and he has an act, and that is really who he is. But if you kind of strip it back, it's like he's a guy from Michigan. He's a Midwestern guy that loves rock and roll music, So I think we had a lot of we just liked a lot of music in common. So as we started kind of meeting each other and talking, it was like, oh, you're kind of not the dude I expected you would be. You're in a good way. He was surprising me in a good way. So that was the cruise experience. Was that, and then that led to more stuff, which I guess let me segue it off to Gordy. I'll let him talk a little bit about this too, because there's lots of good stuff.
Oh man, there's so many good stories. We did the cruise, I don't know, 4 or 5 or 6 years in a row, I think, and just kind of became friends. But I think it was the second year we did the cruise. We had released a record a few months earlier, and we sent him a copy, and then we get on the boat, and he's like, "Hey, Ed, Gordy, I got to talk to you guys." And he's like, "I might have ripped off one of your songs, but I want you to hear it. And if you hate it, I'll scrap it. If you like it, I'll give you whatever you want in publishing. Let's work it out." It's like, okay, that's interesting. And he plays us this demo that it's our song, the verse of the song, even the melody is identical, the chord changes are identical, about half the words are the same. And he totally changes the chorus. And this song, it's a song called Shotgun, our version of it. When Ed and I were writing it, we wrote this kind of catchy verse in 4/4 time. It's got some tempo and catchy melody. And when we get to the chorus, we came up with this really weird, slow. We shifted it to 3/4 time and slowed it down, but it was weird, but we like it. And when we were writing the song, I remember talking about it, I was like, that if we do this with the chorus, we're eliminating all chance of success at radio or anything with this tune. And we were both kind of like, yeah, so what? It's cool. We like it. So we wrote this song, we recorded it, and apparently Kid Rock, his name is Bob heard the song, and he had a similar thought that, he even told us, he's like, "Oh, you totally fucked up the chorus." So he rewrote the chorus and turned it into a song called FOAD, FOAD, which stands for the main refrain at the end of the chorus, which is "fuck off and die." Now, if somebody had told me that I was going to be okay with somebody taking one of our songs and turning it into a song called "Fuck Off and Die," I would have never believed it. But anyway, we ended up, that was the record that he invited us to his house for a week, and we recorded, and we're the band on about half the record. And just, I think through being friends with him and his, just the whole thing, we're like, yeah, sure, why not? So there's that song. But the best part about the story is one day we get into an argument in the studio over who played a slide solo on some Bob Seger record. And Bob Ritchie is like, well, I'll just text him and ask him. Seger lives 20 minutes away. He lives right up the road. So he texts him. They're texting back and forth, and then Bob looks at us. He's like, "Hey, you guys want Seger to come over tonight?" Hell yeah! So Bob Seger comes over, and we're like, he brought his new record. We're listening to his new record that wasn't out yet, that he was showing, and then Bob, Kid Rock Bob, was like, "Well, do you want to hear the stuff we've been working on?" And he plays a bunch of the tracks. About the 4th or 5th track, he plays this song, "Fode." Uh-huh. And Seger's like, "Oh, this is it. This is the hit. This is the best song on the record." And I'm like, "Oh, hell yeah." That felt good to hear, to hear him stoked about it. And then it got to the chorus, and he's like, "Oh, you screwed it up." And they get into an argument over whether you can say fuck on a song. And Kid Rock's like, "No one ever tells me I can't say fuck. I'll say whatever I want to say." But he's like, "But it's Bob Seger. I should probably listen to him."
Right.
So anyway, there's a 4th version or a 3rd version of the song called "Say Goodbye." The next morning, Seger woke up, rewrote all the words to the song. And so there's "Fode," which is on the explicit lyrics version of the record. And then the version that went to Walmart is a song called "Say Goodbye." Same melody as our original tune in the verses, but he took out the F word in the chorus. And anyway, it's kind of cool to have a co-write with Bob Seger and Kid Rock all on the same song.
On the same tune. That's absolutely insane.
Who can say that?
Now, Scott told me that there was the cap that was put on all of this is when he arrived home, at least he had a surprise from Kid Rock. Did you get a surprise as well? Or?
We all did. I actually got home first, We had been, so a little context. We had been in between like two really long legs of touring. So we had a long tour in the States. We had like 2 weeks off. We went to Michigan, his place outside of Detroit, for like 6 days in the middle of a 2-week break, which on the tail end of that was a 3-week tour of Europe. So it was just like jam packed with work. We go to Europe. I get home. I'm like, oh, this is weird. I have like a huge box on my front porch. So I open it up and I knew immediately what it was. I was like, oh, I can't believe he did this. And so I text Gordy. I'm like, hey, did you get anything? And he goes, no, what are you talking about? I'm like, all right, well, let me know if you get a package later today. So anyways, this goes on in succession from the band. Do you get anything? Everyone's like, no. And then all of a sudden, like, I start getting these texts like, oh my God, I can't believe it. So basically, we're up in Detroit at the studio. Gordy ended up wandering into a side room or an office, and Bob had one of they're kind of more well known now, but the Toto washlet, which is a toilet with the bidet built into it. Very nice. So
not just a bidet.
Sorry, a bidet, a dryer,
a blow dryer,
pulsing water. I mean, it's like the Rolls Royce of toilets, you know. So he basically, the note read, as I opened the box, the note read, "You guys are the shit. Thanks for everything, Bob." So he basically sent us each a Toto washlet, which I thought was fantastic.
I just want to say that in Scott's retelling of the story, that the toilets were golden. But
oh, that's awesome! Of course he did. He's right. They were. I did no.
Talk to me a little bit about what it's like to keep a creative partnership alive. You guys are not only in a band together. That's a whole different animal from writing songs together. How has your writing, both on your own and together, changed since you first started, going on 15 years ago?
In the early days, we were writing our own songs, bringing them to the table. And at a certain point, I was like, hey, we should try to, like, it was almost like we should write something together, and just seeing how it went. And, but there was always this, in the early days of the band, there was a little bit of like, whoever brought the song to the table got final say, and they had veto power, and they were the kind of controlling creative force, and everybody, then we would just kind of like help on the edges. But Ed and I kind of started really collaborating fully first in the band, and then it's been interesting how that has changed. Now we probably write mostly apart because Ed lives in Asheville and I live in Austin, and we do a lot of individual writing. But I think the reason that it's worked is just our mutual respect for each other, and realizing that we're both good at different things, and we both know like we're better with each other's input, and the songs I think end up better. And so yeah, now it's a lot of just like, it might be 70 or 80% writing on our own, but then we come together and like finish things off, and it's usually a good workflow for us.
And so you're saying now you're at a point where even if you were the one that brought the song in, if your writing partner really takes a shine to it or has a vision for it, whoever wrote it first might be willing to relinquish the creative direction of it almost entirely?
Yeah. I mean, I think what ends up happening, like, we're writing less in the room together, but I think we probably collaborate more than ever. Like, it's just a much more, we need to talk about these things a lot less now. Like Gordy said, it's just at a certain point you start to recognize, like, what's his strength, and in the band we've all been playing together so long. It's like, what everyone's strength is. So it's like, you kind of want to put people in a position, again, back to the beginning of the discussion, like to do what they're good at doing and not kind of make them do something else. So it's like, I could have a song that's like 80% done, and Gordy be like, this needs. It just sounds like you have a pre-chorus. You need a chorus, and it's like, okay, here's a chorus. Cool, that's awesome. Why didn't I think of that? Great, let's go do it. Or like, he'll have a song and he's playing it a certain way, and I'll be like, yeah, this is really cool, but this could totally be, the feel of this song could be completely different. You know what I mean? We could straighten this out into eighths, and this could be a great kind of rock and roll song, whereas like you're kind of playing it like a folk ballad now. So I think the thing we've kind of gotten to the point with is that there's everything's on the table. It's nothing is sacred as far as like oh, I have this idea about what I want this to be, and it can't be changed. It's like that really doesn't fly. You know what I mean? And if it does, it's kind of like you have to. I'd just make a decision to be like, I want this song to be a certain way. This is just a song. This is not gonna be a song for the band. You know, I'd do something with this song later on or whatever. But by and large, I don't really feel like that. You know, I feel like almost unanimously, when we bring things in, they end up becoming better because we're willing to go through that process. You know.
So is it to the point where when you guys are in Pittsburgh on a Tuesday night throwing together a set list, like you're not even seeing it as you write down, all you see is Heathen songs in front of you. You don't think, oh, that's one of mine, that's one of Gordy's, that's one of mine, that's one of Ed's. Or is there still a little bit of a sense of ownership on a song that you started or finished most of?
Well, I think there's a little bit of that, but I think in terms of like writing set lists is more about like what's the flow of the show gonna be like, and you know, as a general principle, it seems like having some variety from song to song. With that means Gordy sings one and I sing the next one or whatever, or maybe, you know, there's a song every handful of songs. There's one that we're singing together, or one that everyone in the band's singing on. You know, I think in terms of putting a set list together, you're thinking about tempo, you're thinking about different feels, different emotions. You know, I think just things that would make for a good flowing set list. As far as in the studio, you know, they're all Heathen songs. It's like, to me, at the end of the day, whoever brings the song in, it's like we're just trying to get to the best point for that song on that day, and that could certainly change. I mean, we've recorded certain songs multiple times, but really, like, we kind of just commit to, like, if someone brings a song in at the beginning of the day, that's like our normal workflow would be like, someone would come in and be like, hey, I got this for an idea. What do you think? Cool. All right, let's get started. You know, what are you thinking for drums, or what are you thinking for bass? What are you thinking for a general feel? That kind of thing. And it's like, let's go. Let's see this idea through. And then we might finish and be like, that's great. And then a week later be like, yeah, that kind of sucked. I don't really like it. But I think everyone's willing to just kind of go all the way down the path with seeing an idea through, you know, because that's the only way to know if it's good or not, is to do it. It's not to talk about it. It's just to try it. And then, you can go back and reassess your work later and edit as needed.
I think to add to that, that's a luxury that we have, because when we make records, we usually record twice as many songs as we need, or at least 50% more than what we need. We always end up recording more. We write way more than we need, and then we record maybe half of what we write, and of what we record, somewhere between a half to 2/3 of it ends up on the record. And that's kind of what the last few records, that's what the process has been. And I think it's more expensive to record that way. Obviously, you're recording more songs, but we have a studio which helps with some of that. But even like our record that's coming out in a few months, like we went up to Portland and recorded with Tucker Martine, which was not cheap, but it was awesome. And it's great to have excess material, because what it does is you're free to take chances when you know, hey, some of this stuff isn't going to be on the record. And does that mean, oh, it's never going to see the light of day? Maybe, or maybe it's on the next record, or maybe it develops. And I think when you're free to know, like, not everything you do has to be the thing, then everybody is kind of loose and can take chances and allow for, mistakes to happen, or, well, we tried it, and, tomorrow we all realize, that wasn't that cool. But
that's great. I've always overwritten for records by a wide margin, but I've never, by the time I get to record making time, I know the 10 to 12 songs that it's going to be. And it's interesting hearing you talk about that, because I think that's what you're talking about is a good way of going about it, and I might adopt it myself, because I find myself getting into a studio situation when I know the 10 or 12 songs, even if they're really good songs. You know how it goes. Sometimes things just don't take life in a session for whatever reason, or the song that you least expected to take life takes on life, and you have to admit that it's a thing, even though that you didn't think it was. And what do you think it is about sessions like that certain songs, certain moods can take flight like that and surprise you? Why isn't it more obvious, and why doesn't the best song always take on that flight?
You asked the $1 million question. I think if we knew the answer to that, we would, you'd be trying to just be in that lane all the time, you know. But I think that speaks to the larger idea of you have to be open to it, you know. Like you're saying, that's the best part about music to me, is like when you set out to do one thing and you're completely surprised by what you did unintentionally in the process of that. You know, basically when you get to that point where you're kind of in the unconscious mind, it's just things are happening and it's just like, oh, that's it. That's exactly, I didn't even realize that's what I wanted, but that's what I wanted. Mm-hmm. You know, and like to Gordy's point, we're really fortunate in that we have a studio we can work in. So it's not like we don't have to say like, oh, we have 12 songs and we have 7 days to record these songs, you know? Like the last record we worked on, we were demoing stuff for a year before we ended up going up to Portland and basically recording songs completely differently than we recorded them the first time. And in some cases that was like, oh, that's exactly what that song needed. That was the magic touch.
And there's one particular song that we recorded it in Portland for a second time, and it's cool. It fits vibe and sound sonically with what we did up there, and it didn't make the record, but I'm not sure it beats the version that we had done previously. Frankly, like I miss kind of the snare sound that we had, but I mean, we had a process over the last year leading up to recording this record where we all live in different places, which makes it hard for us to be like recording all the time, but we committed to like once a month, whether it's around a gig where we all got to come into town to do a gig, or we're just doing it because this is what we do. Once a month, we would have 2 to 3 new tunes ready to go, and we would record 2 to 3 or 4 songs every month. Mm-hmm. And it might just be 2 days or 3 days. 2 days might be all of us there. The third day might be just a couple of us working on overdubs. But every month, we try to have a couple of new songs done, and they were all done in a way that they could be a record. You know, the quality was there, but we weren't viewing it like it had to be a record. It was just more of like for the exercise of doing it, for the exercise of having like new material and just like having fun in the studio. And those ended up kind of being demos for this record. But again, it's just a luxury that it's like songwriting. It's the same thing with a band in a studio. I think quantity leads to quality, and it's your muscles getting stronger. You know, your songwriting muscle is going to be stronger the more songs you write, and the more frequently you're writing, your brain is in that mode. I think the same goes for recording and looking for that magic take. It doesn't mean that I do think actually you'll get magic takes more frequently if you're recording a lot. It's like a muscle where like that openness, that like your ears being wide open to hear what everybody else is doing, and then having the skills to react to that and make a cool musical moment happen. But yeah, it's similar. Like you said, you're used to overwriting. I think we're in a rock and roll band, and it's our job to write good songs, but then also to like for the band to be its own machine. Like Ed says, it's like a really good rock and roll band is like we've got this really fast race car at our fingertips, and like we could go make a mellow singer-songwriter record, but it's also fun to like, hey, let's see how fast this thing can go, because it's
totally
good
I'm a
machine.
Big, you were saying that you were trying to have 2, 3, 4 songs per month in the can. I'm a huge advocate personally for quotas. When I'm in like a writing season, I'm just like, cool, man. I want to record this thing next October. I want to have 50 songs so I can choose 10. So I can do some back of the envelope math here and know that I got to write 2 songs per week. And the fact of the matter is anything counts. You know, it's like I would rather write a shitty song that week to fulfill my quota than not write at all. And I just think it makes all the difference.
Absolutely.
Yeah. You got to do it. You realize at a certain point, like when I was younger, honestly, like when I had a lot more free time, songs would just kind of fall out of the sky, and I had a lot of them. But you know, as more things start happening, and honestly, as we started playing more music, and you're actually more of your time's consumed with like playing shows and running the band and like making sure all that stuff's happening, it's like you start to neglect the thing that creates the whole thing, which is writing songs, coming up with ideas. You know, so to your point, like committing to writing a song a week, or saying like I need to have 5 songs at the end of the month, it's like you gotta hold yourself accountable, you know. And then it's like you said, I went back last year, I did was in a songwriting group and wrote a song a week for like 6 months, and you know, as I'm doing it, I'm like, wow, this is just complete shit. And then went back and listened like 5 months later, and it's like, oh, no, like there's a lot of really good ideas here, and it's like even if 3 of these pieces from 3 different songs become one song, it's like, that's such a useful, that's a great use of your time,
It is, and I think it's not only just getting older and having more responsibilities. I think in the last 10 to 15 years, everything's changed for all of us because of the amount of media we consume and the immersive element of it. The iPhone and the ability to listen to a podcast at any time, to read a news article at any time. There's very few moments that you will just be naturally idle for something to come to you. I was taking my daughter on a walk the other day, and I had to fight myself to not put the earbuds in. I mean, she's a little kid, so I can't talk to her. She's, a baby. Because it was like, no, I want to take a walk and maybe an idea will come to me. Sure as shit, an idea did not come to me, but I just feel like we have so little space for that in our lives with modern media these days. Do you guys find the same at all?
Absolutely.
Yeah. I think I got a friend, Owen Temple. I don't know if you ever met Owen when you were in Austin, Joe. Really great songwriter, good friend, a really interesting guy. We do a thing called Song Farmer. It's like a songwriting workshop. It's been a couple of years since we've done one, but we've just both been busy. But we have this idea that there are inputs and outputs for the writing songs, and there's inputs like that keep the creative mind working, like listening to music, like a listening input is inspiring, and then words like reading books or watching movies, like story inputs, those 2 inputs, and then output. You need to have outputs too, like writing whatever, whether it's 500 words every morning or just like writing and having a word output and having an outlet for those ideas, forcing yourself to like get them out on paper. And then also, hey, pick up your instrument, whether it's sitting down at the piano or playing a couple of chords on the guitar, just pick it up and like let yourself get it out. And if you're doing all the inputs and outputs, ideas come. And then I also think the thing you said earlier about giving yourself a quota, for me, it flips a switch in my brain. Like I become a hunter, or I'm like, okay, I know I have a deadline.
Right.
And so your brain in your subconscious it's automatically hunting for songs, for song ideas that you can then go and work into a song. But the hardest thing about a song is like having a really great idea, a really good seed where it starts from, and that's the inspiration part of it. And that's there are exercises to like generate those out of nowhere, but like really if you're on a walk and you're just in tune, knowing, hey, I got a deadline, you're going to find those ideas. They're going to come to you if you're forcing that the quota on yourself.
Indeed. Guys, this was a really great conversation. I have a podcast called The Working Songwriter, but I ironically never really talk about songwriting on it. So this was a good chance to do that. Thanks for being a part of the show. I appreciate it so much. Thanks for taking the time.
Yeah, thanks, Joe.
Thank you, Joe.
This week's show was brought to you by Bandzoogle. Built by musicians and for musicians, Bandzoogle is an all-in-one platform to build a beautiful website for your music. Use promo code TWS, the initials of our podcast, TWS, to get 15% off the first year of any subscription. The Band of Heathens' latest album is entitled A Message from the People Revisited, available everywhere music is sold or streamed. If before we meet again you sit down to write, please remember, an expensive drug habit is not a song, a compelling Instagram account is not a song, and most importantly, reverb is not a song. So let all that take care of itself, and for you, just keep your eye on the song.